LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the July 12th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing now on my new Monday scheduled show every Monday, noon Pacific time. This Monday, I'll be using the 14 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. I'll be covering my title topic, where no billionaire has gone before, first, though the Sunday shows covered a lot of other topics, and I'll eventually get to some of those topics, like the spread of the COVID-19 Delta variant and U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the political showdown in the Texas legislature, and even a couple clips at the end about the strength of different factions in the Democratic and the Republican parties. And you can see I put summaries of each clip I'm going to use down in the video description, so you can skip between the clips if you want to watch some part of the show and not others, or maybe some parts you want to watch over again. But I want to start with the Virgin Galactic VSS Unity 22 launch yesterday that brought a lot of experts onto the news shows, like this great clip from Neil deGrasse Tyson I'm going to show you in a little bit, that argues that Richard Branson actually didn't go into space at all. But first, for political comedy, I titled the live stream "Where No Billionaire Has Gone Before" with a Star Trek reference, because I'm a big Star Trek fan. You can even see my Mr. Spock glass over my left shoulder here. So, as a big Star Trek fan, I was momentarily hopeful when I heard Jake Tapper tease an expert he was bringing on to talk about the Virgin Galactic engineers over in this clip.
We're going to squeeze in a quick break. Virgin Galactic engineers are preparing for all systems go for this historic flight. We'll be right back, and Miles O'Brien will be with us. Stay with us.
Miles O'Brien? You mean the transporter chief from the Enterprise on Star Trek The Next Generation, the operations chief from Deep Space Nine? I think he actually ended up being chief engineer on the Defiant at some point. But yeah, so there was a Star Trek engineer named Miles O'Brien, and actually there's this aerospace analyst I've seen on the news for years, especially on CNN, and that's who they're talking about. But I think that actually Miles O'Brien, the aerospace analyst on CNN, did kind of send a little secret message to those people who realize who Miles O'Brien is in the Star Trek universe when they came back from the commercial over in this clip.
Welcome back, and we are now just moments away, we're told, from witnessing history as billionaire Richard Branson is poised to launch into outer space. We've been talking about this with a panel of space experts. Let's continue that conversation. Miles O'Brien, there seems to be something of a rivalry between Branson and Jeff Bezos, who is scheduled to do his flight into space, I think, in about 9 days. What do you make of this?
Well, I don't think it's bad for the space business, frankly, to have these billionaires kind of duking it out. Richard Branson was quick to point out the other day that he doesn't view this as a race, the more the merrier. But it is also worth pointing out that he was planning on flying later this summer. And when Jeff Bezos announced his July 20th flight, he quickly assigned himself to this one. So the billionaires are, in fact, having a little bit of fun, I suppose. And you might say, well, so what? It's just a gold-plated bungee jump. But this is all part of getting attention toward the world of space. And the way you open up a new economy and a new realm is by doing things a lot. And usually the rich people go first. And hopefully what will happen is, as time goes on, the price will be driven down and more of us will be able to go. Jake, in the history of the space enterprise, 60 plus years, only 500 people have been to space. That's not enough.
Garrett, let me ask you.
In the history of the space enterprise, did he really have to use the word enterprise unless he was trying to send us all a secret message? I don't know, is the TV talking to me? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I think the TV's sending us all secret messages, and I have proof I just showed you. But anyway, that was the political comedy I wanted to start the show with. But I actually have more clips on the where no billionaire has gone before topic. First, I actually want to show the two news summaries from CNN State of the Union because of the breaking news of Richard Branson's flight into almost space, I guess. CNN, normally I watch and record the 6 a.m. Pacific version of CNN State of the Union, and then the 9 a.m. Pacific version is just a recorded repeat. But this week, because of all the breaking news, they were both live. So I have two CNN State of the Union news summaries, and they both have a different State of the Union. You know, Jake Tapper every week says, what is the State of the Union this week? Well, at 6 a.m., the State of the Union this week was different from the State of the Union at 9 a.m. Pacific. I'll start with the one at 6 a.m., another Star Trek reference over in this clip.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is looking to the skies. Virgin Galactic billionaire Richard Branson is set to boldly go where no super rich guy has ever gone before, launching to the edge of space on board his own supersonic space plane called the VSS Unity. The Unity will take off on a carrier plane, and then after a brief flight, it will launch at least 50 miles above the Earth, roaring well past the speed of sound. The passengers will experience a few minutes of weightlessness before coming back down to Earth. Soon we expect to see Branson and his crew heading to the launch site. We will bring you that when it happens. But first, back on Earth, the Delta variant is now the dominant COVID strain in the United States, and we're seeing case numbers heading in the wrong direction in areas with low vaccination rates. And for those who are vaccinated, there is new confusion about booster shots. Vaccine company Pfizer is raising questions about how quickly Americans may need another third shot, as the FDA and CDC say, no, not yet. And joining me now, the president's chief medical advisor on the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci, thanks so much.
And I will have a Dr. Anthony Fauci clip coming up, although it will be from CBS News' Face the Nation. Did you notice that Jake Tapper was kind of confused enough to say the word confusion as confuser? And I think I noticed that the second time. This is the third time I watched that clip with you. And what was that? Boldly going where no super rich guy has gone before. So at least there was that Star Trek reference. And you saw the news summary from CNN State of the Union. Both talked about COVID-19 and the Delta variant spread in the United States, as well as this, I don't know, overly hyped media story about Richard Branson almost going into space. By the time I finish this topic, I will explain to you why I think it's an overhyped media story. But I want to contrast like I said, there was a CNN State of the Union news summary from before Richard Branson's launch, and then afterwards it was just all about Richard Branson's launch, although a little bit shorter over in this clip.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is frankly relieved. We just watched history. It was all smiles on board the Virgin Galactic space plane Unity, as billionaire Richard Branson has just successfully rocketed into outer space, officially become an astronaut, and has just safely returned to Earth. Branson's spacecraft flew more than 50 miles into the sky. We saw briefly the astronauts floating, weightless, above the Earth's atmosphere. We are expecting to see the astronauts emerge from the space plane back here on the Earth's surface any moment. Joining us now to discuss from New Mexico is CNN innovation and space correspondent Rachel Crane. Rachel,
So, yeah, there are the two CNN news summaries from the beginning of their program, briefly talking about what Richard Branson was doing. Actually, Mark Strassman over on CBS News' Face the Nation, he had two different news summaries this week. Neither one of them were at the beginning of the program, like the news summary that starts the program. I'm actually going to show you the brief news summary that John Dickerson, the host, gave before he talked to Anthony Fauci. Coming up, if you're following along in the clips, that's clip number 10. Yeah. But I do want to show you later in the program. Actually, Mark Strassman did two different news summaries. One on this Virgin Atlantic Virgin Galactic, launch almost into space of their owner, Richard Branson. But he also did this news summary at a different point in the CBS News Face the Nation program on extreme weather, which, I don't know, that might be the most important topic this week for future generations. But I'm not taking clips of that. But down in the video description, there's a link to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel where the entire program is split up into segments, including if you want to watch that Mark Strassman news summary from Atlanta, always from Atlanta, because I guess that's where he's based on extreme weather. But he also, Mark Strassman, did a report from Atlanta about, that was much more detailed about than you saw from CNN State of the Union there about the Virgin Galactic launch. I'm going to show, this was actually, he did this news summary while Richard Branson was up in the air after the launch, before the landing. And I'm going to show you the landing in a little bit, but this is a pretty good news summary, but it didn't really address what the clip after this I'm going to show you from Neil deGrasse Tyson addresses, which is, did Richard Branson really go into space? And that's why I think this is all kind of overhyped, but I'll talk about that a little more after you see John Dickerson, who's in subbing for Margaret Brennan during her maternity leave, hosting and then, talking very little, but Mark Strassman doing this big news summary about what's going on with Virgin Galactic and the greater context of the billionaire space race over in this clip.
Virgin Galactic's Richard Branson is up in the air right now, looking to check out what space looks like. Mark Strassman has his feet on the ground in New Mexico with more on the historic flight. Mark?
Good morning, John. After a delay of close to 2 hours from a distance, it all has seemed to go perfectly, gone just the way Richard Branson might have imagined in his space dreams. Right now, they're still climbing. Eve, the mothership, will release Unity 22, the spaceship, which will rocket to the edge of space roughly 50 miles above Earth. Unity's 4 passengers, including Branson and its 2 pilots, will then experience the money moment, several minutes of weightlessness. Remember, Virgin Galactic is in business to enhance the space customer experience. Unity 22 will flip upside down so everyone inside can get a good look down on Earth. Its cabin has 12 windows to give the passengers that view of a lifetime. By next year, Branson hopes to start regular flights to space from the company's closed waiting list. The first group of wannabe astronauts has prepaid $250,000 for their chance at space. For Branson, this out-of-the-world trip has been a bucket list wish for decades. But no doubt, this moment is also a milestone in commercial space. Space tourism. It's an emerging market in the battle of the space billionaires. Elon Musk of SpaceX, Jeff Bezos of Blue Origin, and the star passenger of this morning's space drama.
Astronaut 001, Richard Branson.
Starting next year, Branson's company, Virgin Galactic, wants to sell customers the ultimate joyride at the edge of space.
They'll be able to unbuckle, they'll be able to float around, they'll be able to look back on our Earth, and they will have become an astronaut.
With SpaceX and Blue Origin, rockets start the experience vertically, not Virgin Galactic. Its mothership, VMS Eve, is a twin fuselage plane with 2 pilots. In its middle, the space plane, VSS Unity, with 2 more pilots. At about 45,000 feet, Eve releases Unity.
Release.
The space plane rockets straight up,
Fire.
more than 50 miles above Earth. Passengers can experience several minutes of weightlessness.
Welcome to the club, astronaut.
Unity glides back to Earth. Total trip time, about 90 minutes. Since 2004, Virgin Galactic has pushed through setbacks, including a fatal test flight 7 years ago.
Any question has been more challenging than you would have expected.
We've had our tears, we've had our joys, but I tell you what, the joys have been fantastic.
Virgin Galactic's competitors know the future of space tourism also rode on this morning's flight. A catastrophe would affect them all.
But it's really not a race. It's not a competition. I know that sounds maybe a little shallow or disingenuous, but it's not. And I wish every single one of them the best.
We just had a spectacular moment of the live stream where the mothership released the spaceship. Big applause from the crowd here. So these folks, the passengers, 4 passengers, 2 crew members, now on their way to the edge of space. In the battle for billionaire space bragging rights, Branson looks as though he's going to beat Jeff Bezos into space by 9 days. Bezos will launch on July 20th. Elon Musk is here watching. Bezos on his Instagram account wished Branson luck on multiple levels, John. I have to think that Richard Branson right now is floating on air.
Indeed he is. Mark Strassman, thanks so much for doing double duty for us today.
Oh, and yeah, there, Mark Strassman did double duty, but I misspoke before. He's not actually reporting from Atlanta. He was actually in New Mexico. They let him leave Atlanta this month, or this week, and he got to report from the site of the launch in New Mexico, although he also did that double duty report on extreme weather. Like I said, there's a link down in the video description to CBS News Face the Nation's YouTube channel, where they have all the segments uploaded separately that you can watch for free if you want to watch that. And I thought that was actually some of the best context provided for this launch from all the news analysis shows in terms of the billionaire space race that's going on with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, as well as Richard Branson's launch yesterday. But I mean, he did say almost to the edge of space or the edge of space, but they didn't really explain, where is space and what is really important in terms of going into space. And the best explanation I saw from that was from one of the Sunday morning news analysis shows I normally don't take clips from, Fareed Zakaria's GPS on CNN. It comes between the two State of the Union broadcasts, and because they were both new this week, I was kind of watching all the way along, and I happened to see Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson is someone who I've been a big fan of for a long time. I even went and saw one of his lectures and paid extra to get my taken with Neil deGrasse. See, here's a picture of me with Neil deGrasse Tyson. So I've actually met Neil deGrasse Tyson here in Sacramento. I kind of cropped that picture because my wife is over on Neil deGrasse Tyson's left there, so I just cropped it so it shows me. But so yeah, I'm not only a big fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson's, but I think this is like the clip of the week, the best explanation for something that's happening in the news, and this is the best argument for why the media overhyped this flight by Richard Branson yesterday, and I'll talk about that a little more with you after we watch that clip from CNN yesterday together over here.
So let me first we should point out we're both fully vaccinated.
Yes, fully vaccinated, of course.
Is Richard Branson actually going into space? As you know, the Bezos outfit has pointed out that 96% of humanity does not believe he is going to space. Explain what that means.
Well, I don't know what the rest of humanity is thinking, but I know as an astrophysicist what this is. So there is an operational definition of space that is used and invoked internationally. And that definition is if you go up 100 kilometers,
right,
that counts as space. That's about 62 miles.
The Klarman line or something.
Yeah, so where you get that number, it's sensibly derived. So what happens is, in daytime, we sit here and we see a blue sky. Well, why does the sky have any color at all? It's because sunlight, when it hits the particles in the air, selectively scatters blue light from the sunlight. And that happens at an extreme level at sunset. So much blue is taken from the sun that the sun looks red or amber at sunset. That's not the actual color of the sun. It got blue light robbed from it. Atmosphere is doing that. So if you go high enough in the atmosphere where there's not so much of those particles above you, the sky disappears in a sense. It's no longer blue. It's no longer any color at all. It becomes black even in broad daylight. So they figure that's the point where you've entered space. That's at about 100 kilometers. You'll get most of that if you go to the, it's the 62 miles, he's going 50 miles up. You'll get most of that at that distance, but it's below the international level. Now, that
But the U.S., the reason I say 96, the U.S. military has used a definition of space, which is roughly where Branson is going. Navy pilots, I think, get a medal for going, right, for going 50 miles above.
Okay, because you can just barely get a regular airplane that high. You know, the spy planes and things can get that high. But consider, again, I'm coming at this as an astrophysicist. If our atmosphere were half as dense as it is, then that magic height would be only half as high. And if we had 1/10 our atmospheric pressure, it would only be 1/10 as high. If we didn't have atmosphere at all, are we in space walking around on the surface of a planet with no atmosphere? So that's an awkward kind of situation to start defining space to be.
To you, is this space travel?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, so first of all, it's suborbital.
Right.
It's suborbital, and NASA did that 60 years ago with Alan Shepard. Okay,
Right.
Launched from Cape Canaveral and landed in the ocean. And if you don't go fast enough to reach orbit, you will fall out and you'll land back on Earth.
We should point out neither Bezos nor Branson will be placed into orbit.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. So there's, did you go high enough? Then did you get into orbit? That's another kind of, I kind of like that one. And another one is, did you actually go somewhere? You going to the moon or Mars or beyond? So SpaceX's concept is, we want to send people places, all right, as an effort to push this boundary, but push this space exploration frontier. Now, all that being said, I'm delighted that this could be a new tourist attraction in the world. I have no problems or hesitation celebrating this fact. And it should have been happening decades ago. Decades ago. It should have been 60 years before private enterprise ended up doing what NASA did back in 1961. So more power to all of them.
But is there a gain in knowledge that comes from you boldly going to where man has gone many times before?
Yeah, boldly going where hundreds have gone before. I mean, can I invoke this here? Okay, I just found this laying around.
I had to keep it playing till they did the next Star Trek reference, boldly going where hundreds have gone before. Though you heard Miles O'Brien just saying only hundreds have gone before. So Richard Branson has gone where only like 500 people have gone before, which is to the edge of space. But I definitely like I said before I showed the clip, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson's analysis is the best analysis of the topic that I saw on the Sunday morning news analysis shows. I like his explanation that included the question, well, should we really be deciding where space begins based on atmosphere? That means if you're on a planet with no atmosphere, that you're in space just walking around on the planet. Does that make sense? And I like the idea of like going into orbit or actually going someplace else like the moon or Mars or whatever. I think those are much better definitions of going into space than the overhyped media provided when they told us all that Richard Branson was the first billionaire in space. And that's the thing. Jeff Bezos on July 20th, he's going to actually use a rocket to go up above the 61 mile threshold. So he's actually going to be into space if you're talking about where the sky goes black and you no longer have the atmosphere between you and what you're looking at. But anyway, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson did a great job of explaining why Richard Branson didn't really go into space. And before I leave the topic, I almost used this as my political comedy clip. This is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. The clip I'm going to show you at the end where George Stephanopoulos did his interview of Eric Adams, the guy who won the Democratic primary in New York and is probably for mayor and is probably going to be the next mayor of New York. And I'm going to show you that clip all the way at the end, clip number 14, if you're looking at the clip list down in the video description. But that was actually preempted here in California by the landing of Richard Branson. And there was something kind of weird about the video feed that they brought in from Virgin Atlantic. Like I said, I almost used this as my political comedy clip, and you will see why as we watch the live special report landing from ABC of the Virgin Galactic Unity 22 flight over in this clip.
Over the threshold? Main gear, touchdown. And we're going to hold it just like this for a minute. Nose down, nose down. You can see her celebrating inside there. And there's another. And the nose is down. Nose gear, touchdown. And braking.
And there you have it, the Unity spaceship from Virgin Galactic, branding quite prominent on the wing, as you can see there, touching down in New Mexico after, as we keep saying, a historic commercial flight to space, landing with all the pilots and passengers presumably in good shape. One of the passengers, of course, Richard Branson, seen prominently from the camera mounted above his seat several times.
The commercial space from our operational home base, Spaceport America. A beautiful day of flight. What a moment. Congratulations to everybody on board, and of course our very own spaceship Unity, who returned to space today. And of course we also saw beautiful flying from our Eve crew, CJ and Kelly, and brilliant work by our chase pilots, Jamil and Patrick, all of whom are still in the air right now. Great job to you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, there it is. More than half a century since the world rejoiced when humans first achieved spaceflight. Richard Branson fulfilled. Ladies and gentlemen, there it is.
Clean release. Ignition. Good rocket.
So you can recall is, or if you missed it earlier, that's the drop from the Unity spaceship dropping from the mothership. And
what was that? Like I said, ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos was preempted by live coverage of the landing. And why was there that weird, gratuitous Stephen Colbert clip? I guess I'll have to watch The Late Show with Stephen Colbert tonight to try to figure out what that was all about. Although I did see later in the press conference that Richard Branson gave after he landed, he talked about some pictures and stuff he took, and he had like a picture of Stephen Colbert's head with him as one of the souvenirs he took into space with him. But anyway, that is the final clip on the where no billionaire has gone before topic, and I think I explained, as I promised, why I think it was overhyped by the media, and it kind of reminded me of the movie of the Tom Wolfe novel, The Right Stuff. Chuck Yeager, kind of like the Richard Branson flight was kind of like Chuck Yeager's original breaking the sound barrier flight, in that it was launched from a host aircraft, and then you may remember, I've watched that movie multiple times, and at the very end, Chuck Yeager goes back into another aircraft and just gets to the edge of space by flying an airplane or a rocket plane really, really high, and that's kind of what Richard Branson did, is that going into space. I kind of go with Neil deGrasse Tyson's analysis. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section, but now, as I promised, I'm going to get to the news summaries on other topics from the other Big Five corporate outlet news analysis shows. The first one is NBC News' Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd did an introduction and then did a pre-recorded package from Richard Engel about U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was talked about on several shows and has been an ongoing topic. I mean, that is a real important topic, and So I will give a little bit of my commentary on that after we watch the news summary at the beginning of Meet the Press yesterday from Chuck Todd and Richard Engel about some of the contradictions in U.S. Afghanistan policy over in this clip.
Good Sunday morning. Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan began on October 7th, 2001. It was less than 1 month after the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. By December of that year, the Taliban, which had provided a safe haven for al-Qaeda, had collapsed. And then, on May 11th, 2011, U.S. forces killed Osama bin Laden, one of our goals for going into Afghanistan. But what was once thought of as the, quote, good war, as opposed to Iraq at the time, Afghanistan became a forever war, and one that, for Americans who did not have friends or relatives serving in the fight, eventually became the forgotten war. And on Thursday, President Biden said 20 years was enough, and he announced that the United States would complete its withdrawal from Afghanistan by the end of the month. Later, actually, than former President Trump had planned. Left behind, though, is a resurgent Taliban, which is making sweeping gains against overwhelmed and uninspired Afghan forces. And also left behind, those Afghan translators and contractors, America's nation-building efforts, along with the hopes of establishing a greater level of freedom and more independence for women in that country. In fact, even as he announced the withdrawal, President Biden admitted the mission hasn't failed yet. Still, even if most Americans forgot about this war, as NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel reports from Kabul, for those left behind, this war is still very real.
The Taliban are laughing it up in this video reposted by a Kabul police spokesman. And why not? The Taliban have taken control of most of Afghanistan in just weeks, often without firing a shot. Afghan troops are surrendering, handing over posts and weapons. The Taliban give each soldier the equivalent of $80, pocket money for the trip home. The United States spent more than $80 billion to train and equip Afghan security forces. The return on investment so far is low.
Corruption is the main reason for failure of some of our, or surrendering of some of our areas to Taliban.
Fawzia Kufi is a member of parliament and a peace negotiator with the Taliban. Extremists have tried to kill her twice.
I actually had a meeting yesterday with those people who ran away. I said, why did you leave the area? They were telling me stories like they did not eat for 4 days because there was no food for them.
When we visited Bagram Air Base, it was so empty, I was able to bike down the runway. No one even asked what I was doing. The soldiers seemed almost unaware there's a war going on. But two units are fighting. Afghanistan's small air force and the commandos. On a mission, I saw them on the attack, advancing into gunfight. But there are just 30,000 commandos up against around 3 times as many Taliban. The commandos are doing 90% of the fighting. So perhaps no one is holding Afghanistan together more than the commandos general, Hibatullah Alizai.
Everybody was so much relying on our American colleagues and friends here in Afghanistan. We will learn how to alone fight, run this fight.
What about foreign fighters, extremists, terrorists? We understand that they are starting to come back in once again. Are you seeing evidence of that?
We are. You may have been tracking that just in last month we have killed dozens of Al-Qaedas in Helmand and Ghazni and Paktika and different parts of the country.
Do you think Afghanistan could once again be a springboard for international terrorism?
Even worse than 9/11, I'm telling you. Because over the past 20 years, you have invested blood and treasure. You are the main enemy now. Why do you think you will be safe? Why do you think you will be protected? You have killed people in Afghanistan.
The threats Afghans face are more immediate, especially women who flock to schools and to take up careers denied by the Taliban. And no one is more at risk than the thousands of contractors and translators who worked for U.S. troops. Men like Tom, which is what the Americans called him. He's now in hiding.
If I stay here, I will be killed.
Tom worked for the U.S. military for 2 years and 5 months. He has numerous letters of recommendation, including from his former commander.
I trusted Tom 100%.
as things deteriorate, I think he has a legitimate reason to fear for his life.
And Richard Engel joins me now live from Kabul. And Richard, before we get into the debate.
So there you can see the Meet the Press news summary on Afghanistan. And one of the biases of the corporate news media I've noticed on Afghanistan is a bias for staying there. Large corporations often have alliances with big defense contractors and are part of, Trump always complained about the deep state, but there is kind of a deep state in that Glenn Greenwald talked about before Glenn Greenwald became, I don't even want to talk about Glenn Greenwald, but Glenn Greenwald is actually the one who coined the term deep state for the part of the U.S. government that, what Dwight D. Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, that there's this sort of permanent alliance between the government and military contractors that want to support warfare and the use of, if you want to be someone who keeps making bombs and planes and ships and whatever, then you want to make sure that there continue to be conflicts that use those weapons, and that is one of the big biases of the corporate news outlets that I cover, and you can kind of see it in that news summary there. Actually, later, Chuck Todd did this interview with Senator Jack Reed. I almost took a clip of that, but I don't have that clip. But one of the questions he asked Jack Reed was, well, back in 2002, you said we can't be someone that the Afghans can't depend on. We have to be here for the long haul. But now that we're leaving in 2021, doesn't that show that you didn't fulfill that promise, 19 years later? And this is the longest war that the United States has ever been in, and you have to leave sometime. That's just the point I'm making about Afghanistan, and that's the commentary I wanted to add to that NBC News Meet the Press news summary. I'm not saying that U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan isn't an important topic to cover, and Richard Engel, actually reported some good facts there about how the commandos are the only really functional part of the Afghan military, but they're fighting almost all of the conflicts, even though they're a very small part of the military that we were supposed to train. And so there was good information there, but there was still some corporate news bias, and that was the point I wanted to make there. And moving on to the next news summary, well, this is, I showed how Mark Strassman did this report on the Richard Branson flight into so-called space earlier. And then Mark Strassman also did a report on extreme weather, which was very informative and important. And maybe, 10, 20 years from now, people looking back on the news programs from yesterday will say, well, climate change, that was the most important issue. And so kudos to Mark Strassman for doing that report. And they covered that actually on Meet the Press as well. But this next clip is what CBS News Face the Nation covered at the very beginning of their program, which was a brief summary about the status of the COVID crisis in the United States and the Delta variant, and then John Dickerson talking to Dr. Anthony Fauci about the Delta variant, and basically how the United States has all the vaccines anyone could want available, but they still have hit this wall in terms of lagging vaccination rates, and especially Republicans who won't get vaccinated, and how to deal with that problem. So there's a brief introduction from John Dickerson, and then Anthony Fauci answering questions over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. More than 151 million American adults are fully vaccinated. That's just under 60%. But
oh wait, I think did I skip the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary? It's actually pretty brief and deals with COVID over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air, that's a look at the launch site for Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic voyage to the edge of space. The launch has been delayed a bit. We're going to track it all morning long as Branson, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk begin the battle to privatize space travel. And we begin with the latest on the pandemic. President Biden's summer of freedom from COVID is now challenged by the Delta variant, with cases climbing in half the country as the vaccination rate slows, down more than 80% from the April peak. 2/3 of American adults have received at least one dose, but hospitalization rates are rising in states with low vaccination rates. One of them is Arkansas. Governor Asa Hutchinson is standing by to talk about that. First, let's bring in the president's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci, thanks for joining us again this morning. And let's begin with the...
And like I said, I have one Anthony Fauci clip. It's the next clip with John Dickerson from Face the Nation that I introduced prematurely because I forgot about that very brief, less than a minute ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. I don't know, when I used to do the show Sunday nights, people would do a drinking game when I screwed up a clip, but I don't know, can we do that in the middle of the day on a Monday? Should we do drinking games in the middle of the day on Monday? I don't know. I know a lot of people during the COVID pandemic started drinking too much, so I guess noon on Monday, it's the afternoon, right? So you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But anyway, that was the very brief news summary and leading into an interview with Anthony Fauci from ABC. But the actual interview with Anthony Fauci with a brief introduction from John Dickerson on CBS News's Face the Nation is the clip that I started to play for you prematurely, but now we'll play for you and discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. More than 151 million American adults are fully vaccinated. That's just under 60%. But just under 1/3 of American adults have not had even a single shot, which is worrisome to health officials. The Delta variant now makes up more than half of all new cases in the U.S. In addition, there's new confusion over the role of a booster shot. We begin today with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Good morning, Dr. Fauci.
Good morning, John.
Let's start with the Delta variant. It seems to be making the case for vaccination more clear than ever, with those who are being seriously affected coming from the population of those who are unvaccinated. That would seem to make a clear case. Is it that the facts are not getting to people, or is it the people delivering the message to those who are unvaccinated that needs to change?
Well, I think maybe all of the above. It is almost inexplicable why people, when they see the data in front of them, that they don't get vaccinated. We have a Delta variant that you mentioned, John, that is easily transmissible, much more easily and readily and efficiently from person to person than the other viruses, the other variants that we've dealt with. That's the first thing. The second thing, the data that's hitting you right between the eyes, is that 99.5% of all the deaths to COVID-19 are in unvaccinated people. So you're talking about something that's life-saving. So the idea of why some people, for whatever reasons, and we know some of them are ideological, we know when you look geographically in the situations where you have under-vaccinated states, where you have 30% or less of the people vaccinated, I mean, we've really got to get beyond that. And we've got to put those kinds of differences aside and say this is a public health issue. When you hear people at rallies talking, don't get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated, John, it doesn't make any sense because we're talking about a public health issue that is life-saving for you, your family, as well as your community. So you're right, we are in a very difficult position. We have more vaccines in this country than we know what to do with. Everybody and anybody can get vaccinated, and we have people throughout the world who would do anything to get vaccinated because they appreciate the importance of safeguarding their health. So it's a very, very frustrating situation.
I want to get to the science of the Delta variant in a minute, but let's stay on this question for a moment and ask you about human psychology. You say the facts are hitting people between the eyes. Is it possible that people are a little scared, a little nervous, and the more facts they hear, they don't hear evidence. What they hear is, you're a dummy for not getting this. And that essentially people feel insulted when the evidence is presented as if it should be clearly obvious to any normal person, and that all that does is put them back in their corner.
You know, you have a point there, and that's the reason, John, where what's going on right now is getting trusted messages, not government officials like myself, but trusted messages in the community to outreach to people. And those messages could be your family doctor, it could be a clergy person, it could be a community leader, it could be a sports figure, it could be the people who are really trusted by the community. So you're absolutely right. I mean, telling people, you know, you've got to get vaccinated, you've got to get vaccinated. I mean, I think it's important to point that out. People do need to know, not in a pejorative way, not in a finger-pointing way, but just look at the data. 99.5% of all of the deaths are among unvaccinated people. So we have vaccines that are highly, highly effective. And what we need to do is to get those trusted messages, which we're trying to do, to get out into the community and explain to people, you know, in a non-finger-pointing way, why it's important to get vaccinated.
So that was some good information from Anthony Fauci on, you know, lagging vaccination rates and how to get, you know, trusted local community leaders to endorse vaccination. And that was kind of also a question from John Dickerson there I hadn't heard before about, like, by saying everyone who has a brain has gotten vaccinated by now, does that mean that you're telling people that they're being stupid when your whole vaccination campaign is get vaccinated, stupid? That was kind of interesting take on that from John Dickerson. For my regular viewers who go back to my 8 years of my Sunday live stream, or 7+ years, whatever, you all know that I got my second Pfizer vaccination on April 5th. I even have this little sticker here with, I got the shot. So I don't know if that means I'm going to have to get a booster sometime in October, or that's what they're talking. Pfizer saying maybe 6 to 12 months you have to get a booster because of the Delta variant. But I'm not just someone advocating for getting vaccinated. I'm also a client, as that hair club for men guy used to say in those ads many years ago. And that's one of the most disingenuous things from Republicans, like the elite Republicans, and I think even like Tucker Carlson. He won't say if he got vaccinated, but we all know he did probably. But then he's like broadcasting all this anti-vax rhetoric on Fox News, and they're questioning the vaccinations on Fox News in a way that I think is creating some of the problems that John Dickerson and Anthony Fauci were talking about in that last clip. But anyway, that is the last thing I wanted to talk about on the COVID topic. I did want to thank my live stream viewers, and especially I got a super chat contribution from Lula Girl saying hi LV a little while ago. You know, I checked as I was doing this live stream. YouTube has already flagged it as possibly not available for ad monetization, sorry, too many syllables there, monetization. I've been demonetized, but I might be remonetized on review. I already put in my appeal for review, but I don't make a lot of money from YouTube ad revenue. Most of the money I make is from things like that Super Chat contribution from Lulu Girl. Also, I put links in the video description to direct PayPal contributions, and most supportive are my monthly supporters on Patreon, my Patreon patrons. So if you want to keep me doing these weekly live streams, now the Monday Media Mix-Up, you can support me like Lulu Girl did there with the Super Chat contribution. There's a join button under the video, or direct PayPal contributions, and Patreon patrons. Anyway, that's like my brief interlude into ad begging before I get to the next news clips. And the next news summary is from Fox News Sunday, where they are actually, you know, I talk a lot about how Fox News is a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, and they actually did that this week, or all the time. They're talking about there's this actual Fox News graphic that they use almost every week talking about Biden's border crisis. And I noticed that when Trump gave his keynote speech at the Texas CPAC convention yesterday, he also talked about Biden's border crisis. So that was just another piece of evidence that Fox News is a propaganda outlet of the Republican Party, as you will also see if you read the book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, who talks about how Roger Ailes actually created Fox News as a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. But one of the weird things that all the corporate media does, and it's not just something Fox News does, one of the weird media biases I've talked about for many years is when they have an exclusive guest, they have a big bias in reporting to you that the news about that exclusive guest is the biggest news there is. And that is what happened with Chris Wallace and Casey Stegall on Fox News Sunday yesterday, where their news summary was mostly about this big fight in Texas between the Democrats and the Republicans. But the reason it was so important is because they had this exclusive interview with Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott might actually be a contender for Republican nominee for president in 2024. So it's not newsworthy, not newsworthy, but I used a double negative there. I think you'll hear Greg Abbott use a double negative talking to, well, I will get to the Greg Abbott clip. That was my phone, sorry. I will get to the Greg Abbott clip in a minute. But first, I want to show the news summary where Fox News and Chris Wallace, the host, and then their reporter Casey Stegall really concentrate on this big fight in Texas between Republicans and Democrats, although there's actually been breaking news today that the Democrats in the Texas legislature have walked out and they've left the state so that Texas, the Republicans won't be able to do anything on the issues that you'll see Chris Wallace and Casey Stegall talk about over in the news summary on the Texas legislature fight that was only important on Fox News yesterday for some reason. Over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Well, there's an old-fashioned political showdown in Texas right now that could shape next year's midterm campaigns across the country. The battle geared up in May when Democrats fled the state capitol to block new voting laws the GOP wanted to pass. Now, the governor has called state legislators back into a special session to deal with that and other issues like the border wall, transgender student sports, and critical race theory. In a moment, we'll have an exclusive interview with the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott. But first, let's bring in Casey Stegall in Dallas with a look at what all the fighting's about. Casey.
Chris, good morning to you. The agenda is a mix of both unfinished business and a few new items, but they are all measures that appeal, no doubt, to conservative voters. Efforts by Republicans to pass so-called election security measures died with a late-night Democrat walkout at the end of the regular session.
A quorum is apparently not present.
They are now redoubled as House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 1, introduced after the gavel on Thursday. Voting rights advocates critical of the election reform bills say the efforts and plans to redraw congressional districts will effectively disenfranchise low-income Texans and voters of color. Texas Democrats are promising not to back down.
We're defiant. We will defy the push to suppress our votes.
Also on the agenda, border security. The governor meeting this weekend with border sheriffs to get updates on the security efforts.
They have incredible needs that have to be met if they're going to be able to handle this massive influx.
Governor Abbott is up for re-election next year and faces two primary challengers. Last week, actor Matthew McConaughey teased a possible centrist run for the governor's mansion. Republicans, no doubt, are banking on a victory during this special session, with also hopes to energize the voting base and the conservative voters ahead of next year's midterms. Chris?
Casey Stegall reporting from Dallas. Casey, thank you. And joining us now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Governor, welcome.
Well, all right. That's my Matthew McConaughey impression. That I love how Fox News wove in the Matthew McConaughey possible governor or run for governor in that clip, because that's probably the most interesting, most pop culture reference and all of that. And I'm kind of, as I said before I showed that clip, I'm kind of at a loss to explain why the big fight in Texas is the big story, the main story that requires 2.5 minutes of the beginning of Fox News Sunday yesterday. But like I said, it's a bias that all of the corporate news media has, that if they have an exclusive guest, the story about that guest is just so much more important. And Greg Abbott actually got pretty well cross-examined by Chris Wallace in the interview. Casey Stegall in his news summary didn't really talk about the Republican hot button issues, and Chris Wallace mentioned them at the beginning, abortion and the border and trans athletes, and that was in addition to the whole voting issue. And usually when Chris Wallace follows up on a biased Fox News summary, as I've talked about for years, he will at least bring up one of the issues that was given short shrift in the news summary to show what a fair and balanced journalist he is. And Chris Wallace did bring up those right-wing hot button issues when he cross-examined Greg Abbott in the clip I'm about to show, but he intermixed it with the ERCOT issue, the Texas electrical grid, which is an important issue, but you'll see Greg Abbott only really answers about the electrical grid, never really goes into the details of these weird hot button Republican issues that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch Chris Wallace cross-examine Texas Governor Greg Abbott over in this clip.
Governor, let me ask you about the special session in general, because some Democrats say, and this is the word they use, that you are using it to pander to Trump supporters on the far right of the Republican Party. I want to put up some of the key agenda items. Voting reform, as we talked about, border security, social media censorship, transgender student athletes, critical race theory, abortion. And your critics point out that what isn't on the agenda for the special session is the electrical grid in Texas, which broke down during the deep freeze last winter. More than 150 people were killed. More than 4 million Texans lost their power during that. And the question is, why wouldn't you address an issue like that affects people's everyday lives?
So you raised two issues, and let me answer both of them. One is if you look at all these issues that are on the special session agenda, these aren't new items. All of these items were up on the agenda during the regular session. They got close to the finish line, and the only reason why they didn't get across the finish line is because, as you pointed out earlier, the Democrats decided to abandon their job and walk off the job. They did not give us the time to get those other items across the finish line. And so all we're trying to do is to continue to achieve exactly what we were trying to achieve during the regular session. I need to point out to you, Chris, exactly why the power grid is not on the special session, and that's because during the regular session there were robust laws that were passed by the Texas legislature that provide all the changes that are needed to make sure that we will have an effective power grid. I must point out, Chris, one very important thing that most people do not know, and that is what was the main cause of the power grid failure in the wintertime, and it's nothing what anybody knows. The main cause of the power grid failure in the state of Texas actually was a failure by the power generators in Texas to file a simple document with ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And let me know, Chris, I need to explain this very quickly. And that is, in Texas, like in many other states, whenever there's going to be a temporary shutdown of power in a state, there are certain areas that are exempt from being shut down, such as hospitals, such as downtowns, and such as police stations. In Texas, before the winter storm took place, power generators and power transmission entities, they were not subject to not being shut down. When ERCOT shut them down in the winter storm, they froze. Had ERCOT not shut them down, this would have been a 4-hour event as opposed to a 4-day event.
Yeah,
now
but
what is
Governor,
required?
Governor, I've got limited time, sir. I got limited time. And the question, no, sir, the question I have is the power grid isn't fixed. You talk about it being fixed by the legislature, but you had over 1,000 unplanned outages in June. And ERCOT, the agency regulating, is already asking people in Texas to voluntarily conserve energy because it's in danger of being overloaded. So you haven't solved the problem.
Real quickly, Chris, well, what happened in June did not have enough time for all the changes that were made during the regular session to go into effect. But I can easily problem whatsoever. What happened in June, there were mechanical repairs that needed to be made to about 15% of the natural gas and coal-fire powered plants. And during those repairs, there was no blackouts, no rolling blackouts or anything like that, just for a few hours a day. Calls for conservation. Here's the important point, Chris, and that is it turned out that during the summertime, there were exactly 0 people who lost power in the summertime, showing that the power grid does work very effectively.
All right, one last question. You got 30 seconds to answer it. You're up for re-election next year. And
so, yeah, that was sort of a good cross-examination from Chris Wallace, although one of the criticisms I meant to make about the news summary from Chris Wallace and Casey Stiegel earlier, I saw in the live comments along the way, Sylvia Ross kind of made the same criticism in this comment in the live commenters. Yeah, election security measures instead of voter suppression, or they also call it election reform instead of election suppression in the news summary, although they did give some Democrats giving the other point of view. But yeah, it was definitely weighted for election reform and security, not voter suppression, kind of like enhanced interrogation techniques. So Sylvia Ross, thanks for that live comment along the way. And I saw Tom Trask gave a super chat contribution and said that he's going to sign up for Patreon next week. So also, I appreciate that comment along the way, but I now want to get to I think I pretty much pre-criticized the Chris Wallace cross-examination of Greg Abbott. But the one extra thing I want to point out before I get to the last two news clips is that Chris Wallace asked a compound question about the right-wing hot-button issues like trans athletes and border security and abortion, and then he put it together with ERCOT, the electrical grid, and Greg Abbott said all this stuff that I haven't had time to track down whether, I mean, at the time last winter during the deep freeze that all those people lost power, they were blaming windmills. So I certainly don't believe what Greg Abbott's saying now, but I don't know whether it was true or not. And Chris Wallace didn't really follow up on any of that. And he didn't follow up on the right-wing hot-button issues. So that's the criticism that I said before I showed the clip and reiterated now. And anyway, I want to get to the last two news clips. These are sort of possibly minority factions within the two U.S. political parties. First Republicans, then Democrats. Well, I'm not sure. I know Adam Kinzinger, Representative Adam Kinzinger, who's one of the anti-Trump people in the Republican Party, trying to start this movement to renounce Trump and his anti-American values. Like Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney are probably the two biggest anti-Trumpers in the House of Representatives. And Chuck Todd asks Adam Kinzinger, you're not winning. And what does it mean for the Republican Party that you're not winning, basically? And if you lose your primary re-election, what does that mean for the Republican Party? But I'm kind of juxtaposing that with this interview of Eric Adams, the sort of more conservative Democrat who won the primary this week in New York to be the Democratic nominee for mayor. And he also talks about what faction of the Democratic Party he represents, whether, he's anti-woke. Actually, you'll see Chuck Todd, George Stephanopoulos specifically asks him if he is anti-woke. But first we'll get to Adam Kinzinger, what happens if, and Trump has basically taken over the Republican Party, and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, maybe they will prevail in 2, 4, 6 years, but right now they are, if you watched CPAC this week, if you have looked at polls of the Republican Party, it's like 70-80% pro-Trump. So here's the outlier trying to, reform the right-wing white supremacists who are ruling the Republican Party right now. Adam Kinzinger talking to Chuck Todd this morning with an interesting metaphor about airplanes, especially when we just watched this airplane go to the edge of space this week over here.
January 6th, like September 11th or December 7th, is a date that immediately communicates the horror of that single day. But since then, many Republican members of Congress have tried to rewrite history, denying there was a riot at the Capitol, some denying the violence by pro-Trump insurrectionists, some denying that somehow former President Trump didn't incite the riot. While Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger is not one of those Republicans. In fact, he says the vast majority of his Republican colleagues do believe the former president did incite the riot, but have remained silent simply to keep their jobs. Well, Congressman Kinzinger joins me now. Congressman, before I get to January 6th, you're a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, not just as a member of Congress dealing with it. You were there. All right, I want to turn to January 6th. I think it's safe to say on January 7th that a majority of people even in Congress, Republicans in Congress, thought, okay, this was going to be the turning point. This was going to be the moment that Republicans realized Trumpism is a virus inside the Republican Party that needs to be eradicated. Here we are 6 months and 5 days later, and boy, and let me read you this headline in Oklahoma. This is a censure resolution in Oklahoma, not for people that voted to impeach like you did. This resolution is to censure Senators James Lankford and Jim Inhofe for failure to delay the certification of fraudulent electoral votes in the 2020 presidential election. That's the actual wording in this county Republican Party. And just so you think I'm not picking on one county in Oklahoma, the actual chair of the Republican Party has endorsed a primary challenger to James Lankford over this issue. Senator Lankford was standing up there to object to the electoral votes in Arizona when Vice President Pence was taken off the Senate floor. Senator Lankford is a traitor now inside Trump's Republican Party, Congressman? Seriously?
Oh, look, here's what's happened. It's just like Donald Trump's method, right? I mean, the biggest enemy to MAGA world right now is not even me or Liz Cheney, it's Mike Pence. Mike Pence is one of the most faithful people to Donald Trump. But if you ever turn an ounce against Donald Trump, you're out of the tribe. And so to all of my colleagues in politics, let me say this to you. You either have to be a zombie for the MAGA belief system, whatever that is today or tomorrow, it varies every day based on Donald Trump's whims, or actually stand up and tell your constituents the truth. And that's what we have to do, is tell people the truth. We all know what the truth is. You guys know what the truth is. The American people and your base deserve to hear it. So that's the moment we're in. Just this kind of chaotic, people scared to do anything, scared of their own shadow, absolutely desperate to get reelected. And meanwhile, the innocent people of our base that in many cases have been led to believe that the election was stolen is not hearing anything from any of the people that they trust.
And actually, there are members of this base are so believing misinformation, they're getting themselves killed from the coronavirus. Let me ask you this, Congressman. You're running for re-election. You're running sort of unabashedly on this. If you lose your primary, what does that say? I mean, does it mean that misinformation is winning? Does it mean our democracy is as fragile as it appears?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's a choice. Look, no matter how a primary comes out, I know that I will have put it all on the table and done the right thing. And that's a choice for the Republican Party to make, because it's not going to be people like me or some, Oklahoma state committeemen. It's going to be the people that go and vote in these primaries. And if our party decides that, COVID vaccine hesitancy or COVID denialism or January 6th was BLM and Antifa, but yet we don't want to investigate it because none of that makes sense. If we want to be that as a party, that's the choice the party can make. You will never be a national party again, and the American people will find something different to replace you, because this is unsustainable. But I'm going to fight for the soul of this party. Right now, it's like being on a plane that's been hijacked, screaming towards the ground, and it may feel like a fun ride, but it doesn't end well.
Which part of being on a hijacked plane feels fun now? That metaphor was kind of weird, and he actually, Adam Kinzinger, I think was also on, was it State of the Union? I'm pretty sure, and he gave an abbreviated version of that metaphor that made even less sense. But I actually cut out the part of that interview where Adam Kinzinger talked about how he thought we were being handed a huge defeat in Afghanistan as a former Iraq and Afghanistan vet. So there's a link down in the video description to see the entire Meet the Press program if you want to see that. But Adam Kinzinger is definitely a outlier in the Republican Party. Most of the Republicans are part of the Trump cult, I guess. I mean, they believe in these weird conspiracy theories. The election was stolen. It was rigged. I actually watched all of Trump's speech last night, and it was crazy. He even bragged about how he passed that test to prove he wasn't suffering from dementia again. It was really weird, but I decided not to take any clips from that, although I did notice, as I was saying earlier when I talked about this book, The Loudest Voice in the Room, that in Trump's speech last night, he talked about Biden's border crisis, which is like a talking point I hear all the time on Fox News. But anyway, I digress back into Fox News biased talking points when I really want to get to, well, this actually has something to do with the Fox News biased talking points I talked about a couple weeks ago, where Fox News has been promoting this idea of a huge crime wave in the United States that is a result of the defund the police movement, which there are so many problems with that narrative, but there has been some increase in crime, especially in certain big cities, and that apparently affected the results in the New York City mayoral race, or at least the Democratic primary, where after using ranked choice voting, the Democrats in the primary elected one of the more conservative candidates, this former police officer Eric Adams, and he appeared on a couple of the news programs yesterday, including ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos did a brief introduction about the New York City mayoral primary and then asked Eric Adams a couple questions about what his election means to the Democratic Party, and this is kind of the juxtaposition with the Adam Kinzinger clip, because this is about the more conservative wing of the Democratic Party versus the more woke defund the police progressive wing, kind of like Adam Kinzinger is the, rational, fact-based wing of the Republican Party versus the Trump, Biden stole the election fantasy, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, wing of the Republican Party. And anyway, that is my introduction to the final newsmaker clip before I show you the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip to end the show. But here's Eric Adams answering, what's the message to the Democratic Party? Is he anti-woke? And what is the coalition of Democrat or of New Yorkers that he's put together to probably most likely be mayor, since I guess the Democrats to Republicans in the general election is like 7-1 in New York City. So he's probably going to be the next mayor, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that final news clip together over here.
I am the face of the new Democratic Party. Look at me, and you're seeing the future of the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party fails to recognize what we did here in New York, they're going to have a problem in the midterm elections, and they're going to have a problem in the presidential elections.
Eric Adams on track to be the next mayor of New York City. He won the Democratic primary where ranked choice voting was used for the first time. He joins us now for his first Sunday interview. Congratulations on your win.
Thank you, George.
So you saw what we just played right there, that warning you had for the Democrats. What should Democrats across the country take away from your victory?
We can't be so idealistic that we're not realistic. Cities are hurting all across America, and New York personifies that pain. The inequalities, the gun violence, the lack of really looking after everyday blue-collar workers, I like to say. And we have failed for so many years, and we've allowed the fallout of the Trump administration to have an overreach in philosophy and not on the ground real issues that are facing everyday New Yorkers.
So is it fair to call you an anti-woke Democrat?
No, some of us never went to sleep. That's the problem. A 35-year record of fighting for reform, but public safety, a person who was arrested by police, assaulted by police, but also lost a childhood friend to gang violence. And so I never went to sleep. And people who have finally realized that there are issues out here believe they can carve the entire Democratic agenda.
You were declared the winner after several elimination rounds in this ranked choice voting, but only about 30% of Democrats ranked you first. How will you reach out to all New Yorkers, Democrats and Republicans alike, who haven't supported you? Right, and 30% ranked me first, but that's more than any other candidate that was ranked first. Right. That's important. I run 4 boroughs in the city of New York, a cross-section of men and women of all ethnicities and gender. No matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, or you didn't vote for me, you don't want to be pushed on the subway tracks due to someone dealing with mental health issues. You don't want to have your 3-year-old babies being shot. I have a universal message to all New Yorkers. No matter who you voted for, I'm going to make sure that our economy returns and that we are a safe city, which is a prerequisite to prosperity.
So that is an interesting message. Later in that interview, you can see the entire ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos at the link I put down in the video description. And if you watch the whole interview, he actually says very positive things about President Joe Biden and basically associates himself with the Joe Biden wing of the Democratic Party, which is very different from Adam Kinzinger trying to fight the majority Trump wing of the Republican Party in the previous clip. I mean, I have, if I lived in New York, I don't think I would have voted for Eric Adams. I probably would have been a Maya Wiley voter, and I don't want to go into all the details of that, but Joe Biden was like my third choice for nominee for president. I started off as a supporter of Elizabeth Warren, and I ended up voting for Bernie Sanders in the California primary, but I did vote for Joe Biden in the general election, and so I'm part of the big tent Democratic Party that includes both someone like me who has worked for police reform against and generally doesn't associate myself with police officers as a former public defender, former criminal defense attorney, longtime ACLU activist, but of course all opinions I express are my own. But anyway, I am part of the big tent party, more on the progressive side from Eric Adams, but I think it's important to have all those messages. And the most important point is that the differences in the Democratic Party are about policies, about how you react to certain problems. In the Republican Party, it's like, do you agree with reality? Or are you part of some weird fantasy conspiracy theory? So at least everyone in the Democratic Party is talking about the same facts. We just have different reactions to those facts. It's not like the Republicans, where the majority of the Republican Party has subscribed to just some crazy, non-factual, anti-reality, fantasy-based view of the universe that I cannot even comprehend. So you can let me know if you can comprehend it or what it all means to you, that one of the two political parties in the United States thinks that the election was stolen from Trump by the evil forces of Joe Biden. What is that all about? I don't know. But anyway, like I said, that was the final news clip for the program today. I do have a Dash and Sandy clip. I also have kind of some sad news about my dog Sandy. Since last week's show, she has been exhibiting some fairly serious symptoms. For a while, she couldn't even stand up. At first, we thought there was something wrong with her leg because she was kind of stumbling, but she also developed this nystagmus where her eyes were bouncing back and forth, and she has her head tilted, and we took her into the vet, and apparently there's something wrong with her inner ear. Hopefully it's what's called old dog vestibular disease, where they have some inner ear problem. We're giving her medication and ear drops, and she seems to be getting better. But in my Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip, you will notice that Sandy kind of has her head tilted, because I think she's getting better, but she has been kind of stumbling around, and the nystagmus has gone away, where her eyeballs aren't bouncing back and forth. That, as a former criminal defense attorney, I know about nystagmus. It's when you get really drunk and you feel like the room is spinning around. Well, your eyes kind of bounce back and forth as your brain thinks the room is spinning around to try to focus on a point that you can't focus on. Well, that's kind of what's been happening with Sandy, and it's been kind of sad. But like I said, she's improving. She's getting good veterinary care, and hopefully by next week I'll be able to give you a good update. Like I said, I think she's getting better. But you can. This is a clip I took yesterday of first Dash the cat, and then Sandy the dog standing right outside my studio. You'll see a big pile of Ethernet cable, because that's one of the things I need to use to get the show to work right. And that is the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip to finish the show with today over here.
Steele Source told the FBI the info was totally unserious, and they did not inform the court of any of this, and they kept on spying on the Trump campaign. In addition, the press is part of this crooked operation, you know that. Election rules were changed, big tech censored the opposition, political violence was legitimized and encouraged by the left, and then Trump, President of the United States, was banned from...
And you can kind of see how Sandy's head there is tilted to the left, but she's been walking around better for a few days. She wasn't whining or barking, which is very odd for her, and she started whining and barking a little more, so I'm hoping she's on the mend, and I hope by next week I can give you a good update on that. But until next week, or until I have some reason to upload some other kind of video in between my Monday shows, anyway, thanks to all of you who showed up for the live show. I will try to reply to some of the recorded show comments when those show up. And anyway, until next Monday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.